we sat down with State Senate Majority Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins for a broad-ranging interview. We asked the leader about the potential of a change to state law at the time, budget negotiations ahead, and priorities for the Democratic Conference. Here's that interview. Thank you so much for joining us here today, Leader.
It is really good to be with you. Thank you.
I'm so excited for our conversation, and naturally, I wanted to start with affordability in the state. Of course, it's no secret that is the focus this legislative session, and that has been the focus for your conference for some time. This year, Governor Kathy Hochul proposed in her executive budget addressing affordability by way of inflation refund checks, expanding the child care tax credit, middle-class tax cuts, as well as universal school meals. So I wanted to get your take on what the governor is proposing. Are you fully aligned with the governor's vision, or are you hoping to potentially deviate from those plans in the One House budget, for example?
Well, let me say that I am certainly aligned with her vision of affordability. And the thing that I always say is it's great when you have a partner in government who is rowing in the same direction. You know, we're not fighting about the fact that childcare is too expensive. We're not fighting about the fact that people need to have more money in their pockets. We certainly have been championing things like free school meals for years. So, and also the Empire State Child Tax Credit, we expanded it before, and we know how important these kinds of things are to working families. So we are definitely on the same page. Obviously, in our One House budget, we will explore as many ways as possible to be able to make life more affordable. And in the intervening weeks, I think you might have already seen that we've done several packages. We did a housing affordability package just yesterday. We did a press conference on it yesterday. Last week it was utility bills. We are looking at every aspect of our lives to see if we can't create some more opportunities for people to feel that they have a shot, that New York is affordable, and that people in these seats are working to make sure that it's affordable.
And how will you work with the governor and Assembly Speaker Carl Hastie to address affordability in a way that suits your, Senate majority best, or is in line with your vision?
Well, each house works differently, and we always say the governor is fortunate. The governor has a consensus of one, and she gets to say, well, this is, what I think on behalf of people. And of course, we in the Assembly and the Senate have the privilege of working with colleagues from all over the state. And I really think that's so important, because everybody represents a different constituency and different issues. And so you have an opportunity to sit down and listen to, and of course my Democratic conference too is not only like the third largest in the history of that chamber, but also, again, represents all kinds of demographics and geographics. And so we really have a wide range of views on what people need. And I think you saw that come into play with the housing package last year, when we were able to do infill housing upstate and support NYCHA downstate, and make sure that homeowners had an opportunity, if they were in crisis with their mortgages, to get money and resources to help them in those situations, and also making commitments to add more affordable housing, and did the 485X in terms of building more affordable housing in the city and protecting, labor and union jobs, while we're making sure that we are increasing the housing stock. And even with the, working with the City of New York in terms of the City of Yes. So when you have a diverse opinion and diversity of opinion, and you have opportunities to advance the ball in several different ways, I think we optimize our presence here. So that's how we work in the Senate. I'm sure that's how the Assembly works. And then we all get together and try and craft a package that works for all New Yorkers.
And apart from affordability, what are some of the other big policy issues that you're hoping to address in the final enacted budget this year?
Well, they're always the same policies. We're always worried about making sure healthcare is accessible and high quality for all New Yorkers. We're also always focused on education. I mean, education and healthcare are the two biggest drivers in our budget. So we obviously are always focused on making sure that schools have the resources that they need in order to create the educational opportunities that our children need to be able to compete in this global economy. So it's always that, and obviously we've got to address the MTA because people are waiting for that to happen, and so that is something that we will also be addressing in this budget.
Yeah, how do you plan to address the MTA? I know that before the beginning of session, you and Assembly Speaker Carl Hastie actually rejected the capital plan for the MTA, causing a lot of controversy, of course. So I'm curious, how are you hoping to address funding for the MTA in the final budget this year?
Well, see, this is the key. So that was the key. We had a spending plan, but we did not have a funding plan. So say we didn't reject the capital plan. We did not know, however, how the deficit of about $33 billion with a B was going to be met. And that's why we both felt that it would be better addressed in the budget while we're talking about resources and we're talking about, how it is that we will be able to make sure that the MTA has the resources that they need in order to continue being what we know is really the lifeblood of our economy. I mean, we need to fund it, but we actually just had a spending plan. We did not have a funding plan.
Mm-hmm. And are there any non-starters for you as you approach budget negotiations this year?
No, not that I can then think of. I mean, there's obviously policy that has been put into the budget, whether it's the cell phone policy or looking at mental health and how we're dealing with the issues that we know folks are concerned about. But I think all of those things are important conversations to have. And like I said, last year when the governor had decided, for example, that you wanted to change the formula in one particular direction, it was around the hold harmless. You may remember that, but that was a non-starter because so many school districts had already anticipated revenue. And then with a change in the formula, almost half of them would have lost that revenue, and it would have been problematic, which, again, I'm happy that we all understood and understand that the formula certainly needed updating and tweaking. And so in that conversation, we came to the agreement that we would take a look at the formula through the Rockefeller Institute. And so now, there is a conversation to be had about the elements in this formula, but no school district would have less than a 2% increase. So, we're not starting at a deficit sum, anticipated more based on the previous formula, and we'll have to take a look at that. But again, no non-starters, things that we're going to have to tweak, we're going to have to talk about, we're going to have to get to consensus as to how we can move forward. But I generally feel that we are moving in the right direction, and certainly with the uncertainty that looms with what's happening in our federal government, I do believe that we will be able to chart a course that is good for New Yorkers.
And some Republicans in the legislature have been pretty critical of what they call one-party rule here in Albany. And as someone who was in the Democratic conference when, you all had the minority and now you're on the other side in the majority, do you empathize with that at all? And do you have any plans to potentially work with Republicans to allow them to have a seat at the table or, compromise on certain policy issues?
Well, again, in our chamber, and a lot of people do not realize this, but in our chamber, the Republicans had the majority for the better part of 100 years. I'm the longest serving Democratic majority leader in the history of the Senate. and I have been majority leader for 6 years. So this will give you an understanding of what we're talking about. And I always say to my colleagues on the other side, I just want parity. I want this, 100 years, like you guys had it. But, that being said, yeah, I think whenever whenever you've experienced being the marginalized people, the under served, or the disregarded, or whenever you're treated in that way, I think it's good to remember how that felt. If the circumstances change. And one of the things that I've done as majority leader is always take that into account. I, have a good relationship with the minority leader. Unlike when we were in the majority, I have shared resources, whether it's capital or other things that frankly never happened before. And I will also say that one of the motivators when I first ran for Senate was the fact that the Brennan Center back in 2004 had named the legislature, New York State legislature, the most dysfunctional in the country. And one of the motivators was that I would not be part of that. And part of that being called dysfunction was the inability for anyone in the minority party in the Senate in particular to be able to pass a bill that they authored. If you had a good idea and you were a Democrat, you had to have a Republican sponsor it in order for it to be passed. There were so many obstacles to actually seeing what was going on in meetings. There weren't transparency. Nobody was live streaming anything. So there has been a number of changes that I'm happy to have been, part of and continue to be part of in terms of bringing the quote unquote minority to the table and giving them resources and allowing, bills to pass with their names on it and giving them, appropriate hearings. So we have, I think, reflected a more democratic chamber.
And Democratic leaders have been criticized in recent years for late budgets. So I know you don't have a crystal ball, but do you think that, you all will be able to reach that April 1st deadline this year? I know it's early, but yes. I want to get your take.
Well, again, I've been, when I first ran, the budget had been late with, again, Republican leadership. 20 years consecutively. So, and when I say late, I'm not talking about a week or two. I am saying late. So, again, we really do strive for an on-time budget because we understand that our reaching, our budget deadline helps all the other entities that are depending on us to get to that place do their work. So we really do strive for that. And, again, I have no crystal ball, but I don't see a reason why this would be late. And again, we've been able to, I would say, we've been passing budgets pretty much on time for the most part. And, we're always trying to get to that deadline. We don't think it's a game.
And turning away from, budget talk, your conference has also been heavily focused on reproductive rights and maternal health. In 2019, the state passed the Reproductive Health Act, with essentially enshrined abortion access in New York State. And then last November, voters voted yes to the Equal Rights Ballot Measure, which basically helped to protect certain rights, particularly around pregnancy outcomes. So I wanted to get an understanding of why reproductive rights and access continues to be one of the main priorities of your conference and how you're hoping to continue to build on this in the years to come.
First of all, we talk about bodily autonomy, but the reality too is that there was a time where women had no choice in terms of, their reproductive rights. And even though they, quote, didn't have a legal choice, people were making choices. And they were making choices that, in many ways terminated their lives, terminated their fertility, harm. And I always say, we're the most advanced country in the world medically. And why would you not allow everyone to access what we have in terms of our medical, services and outcomes? And it just makes no sense to me that we would start rolling back what we know has been not only life-saving for people who are pregnant, but also it's just so out of step with where we are in terms of again, bodily autonomy and our freedom to choose. So it will remain a priority. And honestly, when I got elected back in 2007, I carried the reproductive health bill. And back in 2007, I remember the Republicans, who again were in the majority, and we could never pass it. Oh, no, why are you even doing this? There is no jeopardy. Roe is settled law. You're just doing this because you want to get attention. That was really what happened. I carried that until I became the leader in the minority in 2013. And of course, Senator Kruger is carried in the Senate since then and, was able to pass it when we took the majority. And we also, at that point, were trying to update our reproductive health laws because a lot of times people did not realize that New York in 1970 was actually among the first states before Roe v. Wade got passed on a national level to allow women to have an abortion. And so our laws were so out of date that we were just trying to update them to reflect what today's medical environment was. And in fact, the reproductive laws were in the homicide codes in New York. So we were trying to take them out of homicide, put them into the public health, as well as update it. And they fought us every step of the way because Roe was settled. And look where we are now. The nation has, decided that women should not have the right to choose again, and it's back in the states. And so in New York, we will be protecting our reproductive rights. We will be protecting our doctors, and we will be always championing the women's right to choose. And New Yorkers obviously agreed because we absolutely passed the Equal Rights Amendment.
And given everything that's going on the federal level, I wanted to get your take on some of the federal, administration's policies around tariffs and immigration. How will that sort of impact the way that you lead Democrats in the state?
Well, I think that we are going to lead with our values. We always do. We try to be pragmatic, obviously, but we also are, willing to fight for what we know are the important values of New York and what makes us New York. So that will always be front and center. And I met with the Canadian Consul General yesterday. Actually, ironically, they were celebrating, as they do annually, the friendship and the relationship between Canada and the United States. I mean, we have a $50 billion trade relationship, and the Canadian folks are trying to figure out what we were solving, what the president is solving for. What is the issue? And obviously, as you know, there is a pause. I think everybody is hoping that that pause is a permanent one because, again, we have relationships, we have allies, and we are adults. And there are ways that we can get whatever the point is across without costing people money. Everybody knows that tariffs are going to cost ordinary people money. If you're going to start putting a tariff on everything that I potentially will buy, that additional expense will be passed on to me, and maybe I won't be able to buy it, or maybe it'll, again, shrink the money in my pocket. So it's a bad idea. I think everyone said it, and I think the stock market said it too when it plunged. So I'm hoping we can find better ways.
And I wanted to ask you about election law. So recently, the Capitol Press Room reported that Democrats are considering a change to the state election law to allow the governor to essentially have more time to call a special election. And this will, of course, impact the NY21 congressional seat when it becomes vacant. So, Republicans have already said that should that measure move forward, they will be challenging it, and they see it as a way for Democrats to try to circumvent election law. So I wanted to get your take on, some of that criticism from Republicans.
Yeah, well, I think it gets back to the whole conversation which we've had before, which is the affordability. When we consolidate elections, it saves money. It saves money for the various election boards and municipalities. It saves money. So giving people an opportunity to really align elections saves money. It also boosts voter turnout. There's so many, you've got this election, that election, this election. People get confused. They don't know what they're voting for anymore. They don't know when they're supposed to vote or how or whatever. So again, that consolidation not only saves money, but it boosts voter turnout. And thirdly, I will say that the Republicans have sued us for every voting change we've tried to make. I mean, we did not have early voting. I mean, when I tell this to people around the country, that New York did not have early voting until we took the majority in 2019, they can't believe it. And now, can you imagine what it would have been like standing on line during this latest presidential only on that Tuesday? So the reality of whether it was vote by mail or early voting, or, whatever we've done, they didn't like anything we've done. They've sued us for everything. They've never been supportive. And oh, by the way, I don't remember anybody complaining when the Supreme Court seat was held open for over a year when Mitch McConnell decided that that's what he was going to do. So it didn't seem to be problematic then. So, I mean, again, we're always looking at affordability. We're always looking at increasing voter turnout because we believe that, elections matter. And I think if people didn't believe that before, they should be beginning to believe it now.
And as you mentioned earlier in the interview, you are the longest serving Senate Majority Leader, and you're also the first.
Well, on the Democratic side.
Yes, on the Democratic side, you're the first woman, first Black woman to hold that leadership role. So I'm just curious, how do these inaugural milestones sort of impact the way that you approach leadership?
Because I don't take any of it for granted. And even today, we, in this chamber celebrated Black history. And I spoke, and so many of my colleagues spoke, because it's important that when people try and pretend that, everything was always about merit, and now, people are trying to jump ahead or to make themselves more important than everyone else. It's just important that we remember the history, and we remember, as we spoke earlier, what it feels like not to be able to have the opportunity. And so the getting rid of all cultural celebrations, as I'm told will happen on a federal level or has begun to happen, is very sad. Because when you talk about where we came from, then it gives people, again, a perspective of not only the journey that you had to take in order to get to this place, but the fact, again, that nothing is taken for granted. And so that informs me every day. I know that, as I said, I was alive for the Voting Rights Act. I was alive when Brown v. Board of Education was settled, when they were saying, yes, Black children can sit in a classroom with white children. It was not that long ago. My parents would never have dreamt that I would be the leader of the Senate. And I don't take that for granted. And I know that people sitting in seats like where I am will chart the course for the future. And I want people to understand where we came from. And I don't mind telling them. And I'm hoping that it will inspire other people to continue to invest in a democracy, in an American dream that allows people like me and you and everybody else in that chamber to continue to do what they think is best, not only for them, but for the country.
And lastly, what would make for a successful legislative session when all is said and done in June for Democrats and for yourself?
Well, I think if we met our goals, right? If we have a a outcome that we found, myriad ways in order to address the needs that New Yorkers have, not only the kitchen table needs, but also the need to feel that they are protected and that they are our first order of business. Getting a budget that again answers the moment will be extremely important. And just going back to our district, being able to tout the things and to educate our constituents about the things that we've done in order to help their lives. Because I think a lot of times we don't do a good job of really, explaining to people what government has actually done in their lives. So I hope that a successful session will have a lot of things that we can go back to our communities and say, look, this is what we did to make your life better. And this is how, even when we're in the communities, we will continue to draw down on the resources, not only of state government, but also the resources in the community that helps us make the right decision. So I'm sure we'll have a great session, and I'm looking forward to it.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today, Leader. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
I did too. Thank you very much.
And we were speaking with State Senate Majority Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins.